Hello again, I'm Jim Dillingham with ShiftWorks Solutions. I'm here today to talk to you about part 2 of our series of presentations on optimizing your staffing level. Today I'm going to talk about industry-specific issues. I'm going to pick an industry and I'm going to talk about it briefly. The discussion is not meant to be all-inclusive or me to be telling you about your particular site. Everybody is a little bit different. So what I'd like you to try and take away from this is maybe ideas or a perspective to think about when you're considering the staffing level for your site based on your particular industry. Let's just start with general manufacturing, something that's non-seasonal. It could be power generation, it could be making automobiles or something of that nature. So if we want to cover 24/7, for example, and I'm going to talk about 24/7 coverage for all of these. If we're going to talk about covering a general manufacturing plant 24/7, for every position that you have, you need 4 people. So if you have a label operator on a particular machine, and you want to run that particular machine 24/7, you need 4 label operators. Now, once you can take into account vacation, sickness, holidays, those types of things, each labor operator will be absent about 10% of the time, and each labor operator will cover the other label operators about 10% of the time. And so you should expect to have 4 people for every position that you need running or covered 24/7, and expect about a 10% overtime level with that particular head count. So let's go to the semiconductor. What sets semiconductor industry apart from the other industries is it's very, very capital intensive. Where you might have some industries where the cost of labor makes up maybe 25% or even 45% of the total cost of goods manufactured, you might find the labor is only a 3 to 5% cost of goods manufactured in the semiconductor industry. The reason for that is the equipment it takes to make semiconductors is very, very expensive. So when you look at the optimal level for staffing on a semiconductor facility, you want to make sure that no matter what, the plant never shuts down because you're understaffed. Never shuts down because you're understaffed. So that means that you would have a higher level than a non-semiconductor plant, even if that means that you're going to have extra people from time to time, because the cost of having billions of dollars worth of equipment go idle because you're missing one person is too extravagant. Let's go to the food industry. There's a couple of things about the food industry that make it very interesting to me, make it very complicated for scheduling. One is the food industry is often seasonal, and it could be wildly seasonal. You could have production drop off by 60 or 70% during the slow season and then ramp way up during the busy season. The slow season might last 3 months, the busy season lasts 3 months, and in the middle there's 6 months of kind of transition between the two. So seasonality plays a role. How are you going to staff when sometimes you need a lot of people and sometimes you don't need very many people? There are options for this, but it's something that needs to be considered. Another part of food manufacturing is sanitation. Okay, depending on the type of raw material that you're working with, this will dictate what type of sanitation cycle you need to go with. But you will have to shut down periodically and do sanitation. And the question becomes, should we have a sanitation crew? Should we have people that just change hats? They're production people, and it's time to sanitize, they become sanitizing people. So what's the right answer there? How you decide to approach that will determine what that optimal staffing level is going to be. In mining, this may or may not be seasonal. For example, I worked at a salt mine a couple of years ago. It's very seasonal, where they have to bring out a lot of salt to get ready to put on the roads during the winter, and then it drops off in the springtime. And there's other times where you have maybe a coal mine is providing providing coal to a power plant, and that is there needs basically the same amount of coal, give or take a very small percentage fluctuation year round. So mining may or may not be seasonal. However, one thing that is that I see over and over again in mining is the need to do what's called a hot seat change. That means they change right at the face. They change right on the piece of machinery that's doing the work. So this is important because sometimes when you're mining, you can walk out of your parking lot and you're mining right there. More often than not, you go ahead and you punch in, and then you get on some type of transport device that transports you for maybe 15 minutes up to an hour and a half to where the face is being mined. And then when you get there, you do a turnover with the person on the machine, and then that person needs to leave for an hour and a half, something of that nature. What this means is that if it's an hour transit time each way, that for 2 hours at every shift change, there's twice as many people as it takes to run the mine that are actually at the mine site. Given this, it has an impact on how many people it takes to optimally staff your site. Pharmaceuticals are often steady state. Like any other manufacturing, you need 4 people for one, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes a pharmaceutical will have a batch process. For example, they may inoculate a 50,000 gallon tank and let that tank set for a couple of days, and then they'll harvest what comes out of that tank after it ferments or whatever the process is that's going on. So we can have some very peak periods of a lot of activity, and then some dwell time where we're just letting the process kind of cook or whatever it needs to go through. So this could cause some fluctuations in your optimal staffing level. So this needs to be taken into account when you're deciding what the perfect staffing level is for a pharmaceutical. Distribution companies are notorious for having what's called unbalanced staffing. They typically, but not always by any means, need more staffing on a Monday. They hit the ground running when Monday starts up, and they try and get everything done, but on Friday they want to get everything done before the weekend gets here. So Fridays are high days as well. So we have peak Mondays, we have peak Fridays, and then on the weekends it drops off to a drizzle, just enough to provide this or that particular customer, but certainly something less than it is during the week. Also, we have in a distribution center, there's typically much less work going on in the evening shifts than there is during the day shifts. In the days, we might be receiving receiving and shipping, and at nights we might just be shipping, because there may be a lot of the people that ship to the distribution center only ship during the day, even if the distribution center itself has outbound traffic 24/7. So there's a lot of unbalanced staffing potential that goes with a distribution center. So we can't just say we have 1 forklift, therefore we need 4 forklift drivers. It's going to be some number different than that because the staffing is not balanced 24/7. We have service industries. So let's suppose, let's pick a help desk. So we have a help desk that has maybe 500 employees who are all answering the phone. This has a wildly variable staffing requirement. If you track that, if you have sufficient data, you can predict the number of calls you're going to get at 8:10 in the morning versus 8:20 in the morning, or at night versus in the day, or on the first day of the month, or on a Friday, or on the Sunday afternoon. So we know that the workload is going to vary wildly. And if you have sufficient data, you can predict it with a significant amount of accuracy. But once again, this is an unbalanced staffing. We need to not only change the staffing by shift, by day of the week, by time of the day, but also by minute or hour of the day. So this requires some very specific targeted type scheduling, which once again plays a role in your optimal staffing level. The last thing I want to talk about, I know this is an industry specific posting, but I want to talk just about, wonder if you have multiple production lines. Whatever it is you're making, you have multiple production lines. If they all need to run 24/7, then we can go back to one of the other industries. But let's suppose we don't need to run all of them 24/7. Let's say we have 10 lines and we need to run 3 of them 24/7. Well, how does that impact the staffing? Well, it depends on what 3 you're going to pick. Are you going to pick your most efficient lines? Or are you going to pick the lines that need the least amount of maintenance, or the newest lines, or the lines that have the fewest amount of people? Or maybe it's the line that has the most amount of people, but it puts out the highest volume of product. So when it comes to having multiple lines, what lines we choose to run is going to determine what our ultimate optimal staffing level is going to be. Okay, look for the next lesson, part 3, which is going to be the organizational role and what that says about your optimal staffing level. Thanks.